Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, August 11th, 2021, and it's 3 p.m. So this is Women in Business. I'm really happy to be here with you today. Today we're going to talk about a number of things. One of the questions I have is, what do people think of this lipstick? Because I'm not sure, which is not the topic we're discussing, but I'm just interested because I kind of feel like it's a little bright. But anyway, the topic today is social media and what you should share on social media and what you shouldn't, or what I think you shouldn't, and how to go about being on social media and being on social media in a professional capacity. And the reason that I am covering this topic, there are really two reasons. The first one is I did a seminar at Applicant Getaway about the mistakes that people make on social media. And a lot of the questions that I got after the seminar, immediately after, and then later via email, were people saying, what do I share? How do I share? Is it okay if I don't want to put my whole name out there? Is it okay if I am only comfortable doing certain things on social media? Is it okay if I don't necessarily want to share a picture of myself all the time? What are the parameters? How does this work? And so I thought that was interesting. And that was one of the things that led to this topic. The other thing was something that happened when I went to my aunt's memorial service. And a lot of you know, because I share pretty much everything on social media, which is something I will talk about a little bit later. Um, I'm not terribly close to the parental side of my family, my immediate family. My sister and my father would be the people. And they were at the funeral because it was one of my father's brothers whose wife had died. So I saw my dad and my sister for the first time in a very long time. And I found out something that I didn't know, which was they watch the stuff that I do online. I was pretty secure in the assumption that they weren't paying any attention to anything that I was doing, that they weren't seeing any of these videos, that they weren't reading the things that I did, that they weren't following my social media profiles other than they followed them, but they weren't paying attention to them, is I guess how I want to say it. And I found out that wasn't the case. And it really, there's that little panicked thing in your head where you start going, well, did I say anything I don't stand behind? Did I say anything that I think is mean? Did I say anything that I don't believe to be true? Did I exaggerate a little bit for effect or to make myself seem more in the right or whatever it was? And it really kind of hit me. And the assumption I came to was that I stood by everything I said because I wouldn't have said it if I didn't feel that it was justified. But knowing that the people I'm talking about could actually see it and maybe were seeing it, because I had been very secure in the fact that they were paying zero attention to what I was doing. And apparently that's not the case. So that made me kind of take a step back and go, oh, because I fully realize that my truth in any particular situation may not agree with theirs. And that's fine because everybody has their own interpretation and their own feelings about a particular event that might have happened or a relationship or whatever it is. And everybody has the right to those feelings. But it's a little, it just took me aback a little bit, I guess, because I choose to be very open with my personal feelings about my family relationships and experiences that have happened in my past and everything. There are things that I have talked about publicly on video that I've never talked personally with my family members about, if you can wrap your hand around that. So that's a question. And it's something that anybody who is fairly open on social media is going to have to confront at some point, which is, are you comfortable putting all your truths out there, knowing that people who are involved in those stories may not think the same thing or necessarily agree with your interpretation of what you're saying? And, there's no particular, you can't really have a fight about that because everybody's interpretation is their interpretation. You can say, no, this is what I experienced and your experience is valid, but the other person can come back with, well, I experienced this and their experience is valid to them. So it's just something that you need to think about. So those were the two reasons why I thought this was an interesting topic and I wanted to bring it up. And I have to say, I have probably been as stunned as I've ever been when my father said to me, "Yeah, I watch the stuff you do on Facebook," because I literally was absolutely positive that he had no idea what I was doing, that he wasn't interested in the least. So that was kind of a pop upside the head a little bit to go, oh, interesting. I mean, nice in a way, but in another way, like I said, my choice to be open about what's happened in my life and my interpretation of what's happened in my life is mine. And it's perfectly valid for me. But when you put something out there that involves other people, there are repercussions for those other people too. And that's something you need to think about. So that's kind of the first thing that I wanted to bring up, and one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this. I'm going to check the comments here and see what people think. Cindy is here. Thank you, Cindy. Hello, Tanya. Hello, friend. Hello, friend. I don't know where that's from, but now it's running through my head. And Lisa says, good afternoon. Have some time before my appointment and wanted to catch you live. Thank you for being here, Lisa. Still want opinions on the lipstick because I'm still not sure about it. Anyway, I want to share a couple of links with you. The Women's Media Center has a great speech project where they talk about women and social media. And Online Abuse 101 is basically a detailing of the various abuses that happen on social media. So if you have some time to go read that, I think it's really good. If you want the stats, and I will be sharing a few of those stats with you in a minute, but you can also see them on the same womensmediacenter.com speech project, their research statistics, which is harder to say than you might think. But some of those stats are a little bit alarming. And let's see. Apparently we like the lipstick. Hi, Jane. Nice to see you. Tanya says, looks great. Cindy says the lipstick looks nice. And Lisa says, loving the lipstick and the teal pop of color. Okay. So I dressed myself good today. Yay. Glad to hear it. So I want to read you a few stats, and you'll have to forgive me because there are enough of these that I'm going to read them right off the page. 57%, 50%. Oh my God, I cracked myself up. 57% of people reporting harassment in the US are women. An 11-year analysis of online harassment cases found that women made up 72% of the victims and men 47.5% of the perpetrators. Now, I just want to state right out here at the top of this, we're not saying all men are perpetrators of online abuse. I have been in groups where women have been bullies and they have definitely been abusers. So I'm not saying men are the bad guys and women are the angels. There are women who are equally capable of abuse, and there are men who are equally the targets of abuse. It happens. But the percentages will tell us that women are much more likely to encounter abuse, and women are also much more likely to suffer negative effects from abuse than men are. Men are much more likely to laugh it off or take it as a minor thing, and women are much more likely to take it to heart. So let's see. Women experience higher rates of sustained abuse involving sexual harassment, stalking, and intimate partner violence. And what was the other one that I wanted to read here? Bear with me for just a second. Women are 2 times more likely than men to find harassment extremely upsetting, and 2.5 times more likely to say it is very upsetting. Men are almost 3 times as likely to find harassment not at all upsetting. So there you go. And 23.3% of women surveyed said that they were blamed for the online abuse. So that's a scary statistic right there, that 23.3% of the women who were harassed or abused were blamed for what happened. And that is a stat that sadly, statistically, almost across the board for any kind of abuse of women, you will see numbers like that, which is really, really sad, because holding women responsible for the fact that they're abused perpetuates the abuse. So that's something we really need to work on changing. But unfortunately, things move slow. And Lisa's making fun of my 50%. And I'm making a little fun of my 50% too. 57% would be the statistic. So, given all these stats that I read, which are definitely kind of alarming, the question becomes, why would you even be on social media? What's the point? And so that's one of the things I want to talk about, which is why, despite the risks and the percentages and the stats that I just read you, do you want to be on social media? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Social media is one of the ways we communicate nowadays. It's one of the ways we sell. It's one of the ways we build communities and build trust. And all those things can be very important if you're running a business and trying to make connections with buyers. So the days when you can take out an ad in the newspaper or an ad in the yellow pages, or even run an ad on TV and have it be massively effective, are pretty much over. A lot of that audience is segmented now, and a lot of that audience has moved to social media. So you need to be there if you want to be successful at doing what you want to do. In most cases, there's always going to be the outlier case where someone is going to say, well, I've done very well and I've never, ever been on social media. Yeah, there are people who either sell something that's so rare that they're the only ones that can do it, or they've built up a following in their small community and successfully done it in person. It can happen. But for most people, social media is a really big tool in their arsenal. It's the way to learn. It's the way to connect with mentors and instructors and people who can teach you things. It's the way to connect with your buyers and people who want what you have to sell. It's the way to find support and connection if you need it as a business owner. There are a number of things that social media can bring you. So there's a lot of value to being there. And I see we have more comments here. Let's see. Cindy says, when it comes to media, text, email, Facebook, etc., you have to remember tone is added. As in, you might read media one way and I might read it another way. And yes, that's entirely true. And there are people who will be offended by something that was put up in a perfectly innocent way and was not intended to be offensive at all. There are also people who are offensive on purpose because they're hoping that it'll generate a viral firestorm and everybody will get to know them. What they don't realize is that what they're doing is generating negative attention, and negative attention is not the sort of attention that you want. So there's that. But the value of social media in most cases will outweigh the risk. And there are ways that you can also minimize that risk a little bit, which we'll talk about later. But the first thing you need to get over is a lot of people will hear the stats that I just read and have heard stories about, the gamers who were harassed and doxxed and some of them who had to physically move to other locations because their address and phone number and all their vital information was posted online. And that's a scary thing. And it does happen. Now, it's also a very sad thing that women have to worry about that stuff. It's also very sad that a lot of the time when a woman would report either to her company, if it was intercompany harassment, or to one of the social media platforms, if it was harassment on social media, that nothing was done, or that the harassment was labeled as, well, this is acceptable for whatever the reason. It's out there. That's the reality of it. And so, yes, every time you post on social media or create a profile, you are accepting some of that risk. You have to be aware. It's like if you're walking home at night and it's dark, you have to be aware that there is a risk. Even in the safest of locations, there is a level of risk. Now, there are things you can do to minimize that risk. There are efforts you can take to make yourself safer, but there's always going to be a little bit of risk. And and I will say this up front. I have been on social media now consistently professionally since 2006. And I hate to say it because I don't like paraphrasing it this way, but I really have been lucky in that I have not really encountered any overt harassment, I guess is what I want to say. There was a guy, I posted a picture of myself once, and there was a guy who messaged me and said, "Hi, nice boobs," which I thought was a little bit tacky. And had I been the me that I am now, I would have emailed him back and said, "Thank you. Too bad you just insured you will never get to see them." But that's a whole nother thing. And I've had people take issue with things I've said, and I've had a few minor skirmishes in IMs and things like that, but nothing particularly egregious, or nothing that I felt that was scary to the point that I was concerned for my life or my well-being in any way. But I know there are people out there who have experienced situations that are a lot scarier than anything I have. So I think there does have to be a cost benefit analysis. And the cost benefit analysis is there enough good that can come out of me being on social media for me to want to be on social media? And for some people, the analysis comes up, no, there isn't. For whatever the reason, I don't want to take the risk. I've had bad experiences. I am just too concerned about my privacy, whatever it is. So I'm going to choose not to do it, or I'm going to choose to do it on a very limited basis. For other people like me, when I went on social media, I made the choice pretty early on that I was going to talk about everything within very narrow lanes. Like, I talk about a lot of stuff that happened in my life that most people don't talk about. I talk about depression. I talk about sexual abuse. I talk about that kind of stuff. What I don't talk about, you don't see pictures of my house very often, or my car, or even I don't talk a lot about where I live. It's on my profile. You can see it, but I don't discuss it a lot. I don't discuss a lot about who my friends are in my personal life, or even who my family is very much, other than when I tell stories about certain things. And again, in a very narrow parameter. I don't talk about a lot about where I went to school, or, who my school friends are, or anything like that. So my personal life is pretty personal, and I don't talk a lot about it on social media. My professional life is an open book, pretty much. You can learn a lot about me. Some of it you may not want to know. That's what I chose, and that's my comfort level. And so far, that has worked for me. Now, you know, for other people, maybe they're very comfortable talking about their kids and their house and their husband and their family and all that kind of stuff, and they're fine with that. And if you're fine with that, if that's the choice you make, then great. Go ahead and do that. Use social media in the way that works best for you, but just keep in mind that there are people out there who are not nice people. Just like there are people in the physical world that you walk around in every day who are not nice people. And you need to be aware of those people, and you need to make decisions based on the fact that those people exist. Doesn't mean you can't use social media, doesn't mean you can't reveal very personal things about yourself if that's what you want to do. Just make the choices that work for you, and make the choices that make you feel comfortable, is basically what it comes down to. So the question becomes, what do you share? And again, this is a personal preference thing. For business purposes, do you have to share your entire name? Do you have to share where you live, particularly if you sell online? Not necessarily, but keep in mind that there is a certain level of trust that needs to be built if you want people to buy from you. And part of building that trust is sharing personal details. And they don't have to be wildly, you don't have to give somebody the ability to pinpoint the coordinates to your house. You can say, I live in this town, or I live in this state, or, whatever is comfortable for you. On most websites, you will see a part that says contact us, and it will usually have multiple contact information and generally an address, though some places are starting not to do that. I'm not wild about that trend, I have to say, because I think knowing where a business physically is helpful. But again, there are ways to get around saying I'm on such and such street in such and such town. You can get a PO box. You can use one of those, I don't even know what they're called. Well, you can use the UPS store or something like that, where they have PO boxes, or they can give you a drop where people can send letters or packages or whatever they want to send. So there are ways that you can have an address without saying, hey, I'm on this street, stop by and ring my doorbell, which I don't want anybody ringing my doorbell either, honestly, unless I know they're coming and I've said, hey, come and see me. I don't really want somebody showing up at my doorstep and going, hi, I know you from social media, because that's just weird. But so there are ways to get around that. And there are also ways. I had somebody ask me in an email, they said, I don't really want to share my whole name. And but I don't really want to use a pseudonym either, because, I was in your class and you were talking about being authentic, and I don't really feel like pseudonyms are authentic. So what do I do? And I said, well, I'll tell you one thing I did when I was with Enmart. I used the screen name Enmartian. And honestly, I made it up because I thought it was funny. And I made it up because I assumed at the time that were I ever to leave, somebody else would pick up the social media mantle and they could operate under the same screen name and we'd have some continuity. But everybody pretty much knew who I was. So the screen name wasn't really hiding anything. But when it started out, it kind of was, because people didn't know who I was then. So they just saw the screen name and they liked what whoever the person behind the screen name was posting, and they thought that was fun. And the name was kind of funny. Another way to do it is like the ladies at Artistry do it, which is their Artistry, whatever their name is, Artistry Ashley or Artistry Alice or Artistry Debbie or whatever it is. And so you're identified with the company and there's still a name and a picture attached. So there's a person that you can see, but they're not giving away last names or personal details. So you can still be identified with the company and you can still be seen and you can still build a certain level of trust, but you're not giving away personal details. And it really comes down to your comfort level. Like I said, for me, what I share a lot of personal stories, and I share a lot of stuff that many people wouldn't talk about. That's just me. But I don't tend to share a lot of things that most people would very casually share. Like, I don't share pictures of my house, and I don't share pictures of, my friends in my personal life. And I don't share a lot of scenery from my town or give people anything that would really allow them to find me fairly easily. That's my choice. And that's more because when I started working on social media and when I realized that social media was going to be a big part of what I did, I kind of drew a line in the sand and I said, okay, there's professional me over here, and professional me will disclose any number of things. Personal me, there are things that are personal that I don't talk about. And most of the personal stuff is where I live, who my friends are in the real world, what I do in the real world. People know some things I do, obviously, because they're professional things, but, you don't know where I hang out or where I go get coffee, if I got coffee, which I don't, but you know what I mean. And I got to grab a drink here because my voice always seems to go south on Wednesdays. I don't know why that is. But anyway, so it feels like kind of a cop out, and I wish I had a list to say you should share these things and these things are safe and these things are not. I don't. What to share is a personal decision, and you have to make that decision for yourself. I can't make it for you. And you also have to make that decision realizing that some of the people who see the things that you share may have different interpretations of what you're sharing than you do. And that's something that you need to be aware of and responsible to, I guess. So you always, I don't know, it's hard to find the balance. And I guess that's what I'm struggling with, because I want to go, you should be like this. But there really is, the balance is different for every person. That's what I'm really trying to say. And you have to find your own comfort level, which is actually the next thing I want to talk about, which is your comfort level matters. If you have had a bad experience, you're going to be less willing to share certain things. If you're shy, you may be less willing to share certain things. If you have reasons why you don't particularly want people to be able to find you in the real world, which I have some of those, you may be more reluctant to share pictures of your house or comments on your town or information about where you live specifically and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Your comfort level is paramount because this is your profile. If you work for a business that is requiring you to share certain things that you're not comfortable with sharing, then you need to rethink working for that business, honestly. If the business is your own, then you get to set the parameters for what you share and what you don't. And, there's experts that say, oh, you should do this and you should do this. And it's like, you know what? There's no hard and fast rule for any of this stuff. The only rule is that you have to be comfortable with whatever it is that you're doing. And if you're not comfortable, it's going to show up in the post that you put up. If you're paranoid, if somebody asks you an innocent question and you go, why are you asking that? And you get real, back off kind of vibes, that's not going to work. So find your comfort level before you get online. Set your rules before you start posting and then stick to them. And yes, rules can change. You may decide that in a particular protected group, you're more comfortable revealing certain things than you would be out in the general public of social media. And that's perfectly valid. You don't have to say anything you don't want to say. You don't have to reveal anything you don't want to reveal. What you need to do is figure out what your comfort level is with the things that you could disclose, and then stick to those boundaries and make other people respect them too. And that's the other thing that's a little bit hard. And we'll talk about that in the next point. But I think that's another thing that people need to be aware of, is that you can set your boundaries on social media, but then it's your responsibility to enforce them. And if you don't want to share something, if you're not comfortable with sharing something, or if you're very comfortable with sharing something and it makes other people uncomfortable, that's something that you have to deal with. But I don't think I've had people say to me, how do you talk about all this stuff? How do you talk about your dark year? And how do you talk about being sexually abused? And, how do you talk about all these things that happen to you? And how is that not uncomfortable or embarrassing? And and honestly, none of those things, I'm not embarrassed that I deal with depression. I'm not embarrassed that I was sexually abused. I'm embarrassed that I was that vulnerable sometimes, but I also have to have compassion for that person back then. And honestly, I tell a lot of the stories that I tell because I hope that there's value for other people who may be going through or have gone through similar situations. And I can talk about it. I'm comfortable talking about it. It doesn't bother me. And maybe there are other people that don't have that comfort level. So your comfort level does matter. What your comfort level is will determine what you share and what you don't. And there's nothing wrong with having a bad experience and not wanting to share it, or being very protective of your family or your husband or your friends or your personal details. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people are content to just spread their whole life out and it's an open book. Other people are not. And both approaches can work. You just have to decide what your comfort level is. And honestly, this takes a little thought. I would say, honestly, If I were doing it now, I would have given a lot more thought to some of the stuff that I put out there. Not so much that I wouldn't have done it, but that I would have been more aware of the reaction I might get from others and also what it might cost me in certain situations. Because even though I'm comfortable with talking about that stuff, there is an emotional cost that comes with it. And I wasn't really aware of that when I started doing it. And I'm more aware of it now. So that's something that you have to consider too, is if you disclose very personal details or incidents in your life that were perhaps painful at one time, there's an emotional cost that comes with that. And everybody has a different comfort level with that too. So you need to be aware of all these things because they do matter. And as Lisa says here, it's a balance, and it's a balance that everybody has to find for themselves. The other half of this coin, though, is don't be too nice. And this is a failing that women have a lot. We're trained to not be confrontational. We're trained to kind of put up and excuse bad behavior, put up with and excuse bad behavior. We're kind of trained to not want to make waves, to not want to make ripples, to not be confrontational. Not every woman, but a lot of us are. And so instead of being blunt about things and instead of saying, this is making me uncomfortable, you need to stop, or this is not acceptable, this can't happen, we kind of stay quiet and hope it'll go away, or we try to avoid the situation. So we need to learn, like I said, you need to set your boundaries and then you need to enforce those boundaries because nobody else is going to do it for you. And that is very true on social media. I think some of the platforms are getting better. There's certainly more discussion about how to enforce the rules and what's acceptable and what's not. But I mean, the stats I read you, 23.3% of women who are harassed online get blamed for the harassment. You know, that's the social media equivalent of, well, she was wearing a short skirt and she got assaulted, so she was asking for it. Or she was in a bar and she had one too many drinks, so what did she expect? It's a sad, sad commentary on the state of things that in 2021, those kind of comments are still out there and those kind of comments are still accepted. And the same thing happens online. And yeah, a good percentage of women, some of them in particular industries, will try to use a gender neutral screen name or even a male screen name to try to avoid this problem. And I don't think that's necessarily, from a business perspective, that's not necessarily solving the issue either, because if you want people to trust your business and to trust doing business with you, they have to have a realistic idea of who you are. So, you know, using the screen name George is probably not going to be as effective as it might be in some other arenas. So that you need to be aware of that too, that avoidance of the problem is not solving the problem and may not be serving you as well as you need it to. It's just reality. But what we need to learn to do as women, and we need to learn to do this collectively, and we need to learn to do this individually, is stand up for ourselves. Demand that these social media platforms become a safer place for us. Agitate and shout and yell and, you know, make a fuss and let people know that it's not acceptable, that we have to be scared to be ourselves on a social media platform, that we have to put up with some jerk guy seeing a picture of us and going, oh, nice boobs. I mean, you know, come on. I mean, leaving aside the fact that this particular guy, I mean, was deficient in a hell of a lot of manners and any training in the niceties of polite society, but somebody sent that thinking that it was acceptable, or sent that not caring that it wasn't acceptable, or, scariest of all, sent that thinking that I would be flattered. And I mean, I like my chest as much as anybody else, but I'm not particularly, there's a time and a place, let's put it that way. So the whole thing, there, you hope, let me put it this way, you hope that there's a set of manners and polite practices that reign on social media, and you hope that everybody rationally would realize that there are certain things that you don't do. That isn't the case. And so we as women need to take it upon ourselves to protect our territory, protect our boundaries, and protect ourselves. And if that means we have to make a fuss, if that means we have to report people multiple times, if that means we have to fight back in whatever method we can, then yeah, that's what it means. And unfortunately, for a lot of women, we're trained to do exactly the opposite. We're trained to say no thank you when a guy grabs us at the bar. We're trained to laugh politely when a guy pats our butt instead of hauling off and slugging him. We're trained to put up with a guy who keeps asking us to smile when we're walking down the street, or the guy who woof whistles at us. We kind of tend to laugh it off or let it go because we don't want to start an incident, because we don't want to turn it into something larger. But the problem with that is if we keep letting it go, then people keep thinking that that's an acceptable thing to do, or that they're just being nice, or they're just complimenting us. And it doesn't feel like a compliment, and it's not a compliment. So we need to set our boundaries and guard them, basically. We need to be our own knights. And Cindy King says there will always be trash out there. She is not wrong. There always will be. And there will always be trash that isn't going to learn. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. That doesn't mean that we have to just go, well, there's always trash out there and, you know, it's just part of being a woman. Bullshit, it's part of being a woman. It shouldn't be part of being a woman. And I say this, like I said, I've been, sad to say, extremely lucky. And I'm sad to have to say it that way. I'm sad that I can't say my experience has been the experience that most women have, because I don't think it has. And that makes me sad. That there are more women who probably have had bad experiences than there are women who have had good experiences. And that's really sad, because social media is such a vital tool in so many areas of our lives. But one way to start perhaps turning the trend is to stop being so nice, to stop writing it off, to stop saying it's a minor annoyance, to stop going, oh, you know, boys will be boys, men will be men, blah, blah, blah. Don't do it. If you feel that it's harassment, if you feel that it's infringing on you, if it makes you uncomfortable, stand up to it. There was an interesting experiment, and I wish I could remember who did this now, but I don't. I'll have to look online after the show. But there was an interesting experiment where they actually had men read, and not tweets that they'd sent or posts that they'd made, but they had men read kind of negative or derogatory or sexual or harassing tweets and posts to women face to face. And the result was that when the men could actually see the women and how they visibly reacted, they were very, very uncomfortable. And I think that's the other thing that happens on social media is you can't see the person that you're talking to. You can maybe see a picture of them, but you're not physically in their presence. You can't see them tear up. You can't see them make a face. You can't see them do this because they're uncomfortable. You can't see that. So we need to do the equivalent of that online and let people know, other women or men, whoever it is, let them know that they're making us uncomfortable. They're hurting our feelings. They're creating an environment that isn't fun, whatever it is. And stand the ramparts, stand the boundaries, and make a noise and make a fuss, because that matters. And the more that we're nice about it, and the more we pass it off, and the more we say, oh, that's just men, or oh, that's just how social media is, the more it's going to happen. Because the only way things change is if people agitate for change. Think of how women got the vote. They worked for a lot of years. And Cindy says another thing that I think is really sad, but she's true. We just have to always be on guard. Sad, but it's a true statement. You do. I think every woman who's on social media, always in the back of her mind somewhere, there's the fact that this guy that's commenting on her post might be a harasser, or this woman could be a bully, or if I post something controversial, are the sharks going to start circling? All these things can happen. So it's sad but true. You do have to be on guard. You do have to be a little bit armored. And I think the only way we change that is by stopping being so nice, calling people out, letting them know what they've done and that it's not acceptable, and making a big enough fuss that everybody gets it, because it does matter. We have as much right to be on social media, we as women, as anybody does. And sorry, but creaky voice is back today. I don't know why. And I don't know that helped. Wow. Anyway, and one of the ways that we can stand the boundaries is to report and request enforcement. In the Women in Garment Decoration Facebook group, one of the top rules that we have is, no bullying, no harassment. And if somebody reported that they had been harassed or bullied, and we found that to be true, then whoever had done it would be out of the group so fast their head would spin, and they would be banned forever. I will not tolerate it. It will not happen in my group. And I know a lot of group runners like that who are trying to create a positive, open, helpful place for people who want to come and learn or share or whatever it is. And they want to make it a safe place. And I've been really lucky in the Women in Garment Decoration group, because we have a great group of women. And I've never had a problem there with bullying or harassment or really any kind of issue. I mean, it's been very, very rare in the couple of years that the group's been alive. A couple of years the group's been alive. I guess it feels like a living thing to me. So one of the ways that you can help perpetuate the rules changing is to report problems and request that rules be enforced. And you can either do that if you're in a group or you're on a page. You can do that to the page owner or the person who runs the group, or just to the platform at large. Now, if you report to the platform at large, okay, granted, your odds of maybe getting redress for your problem are going to be a little bit less. And that's not great. I understand that. But it's still worth doing, because if enough people report it, and if enough people start showing trends of behavior and certain people who are behaving in bad ways, for lack of a better term, then maybe the platforms start to get a clue. So again, it's collective voices. It's standing up for ourselves and standing up for each other. And I understand that most of the harassment that happens is not the stuff that you read about in the newspapers, is not the extreme stories of people being doxxed and, people being threatened with rape and we're going to come and cut your head off and murder your pets and all that stuff. I understand those cases are probably a lesser proportion of the things that happen. But the problem with that is we tend to, because they're not big and bold and really scary, we tend to kind of go, well, it's just part and parcel of being on social media. It's just kind of how it is. It's like when I was in college and we went to the bar, if the guy hit on you and wouldn't go away, you just kind of went, oh, it's so annoying when the drunk guys won't leave you alone. And, it's also why all the girls went to the bar in a group and you stuck together like the herd, because you didn't want to be the sick one that the lion was going to take down, which is sad, but it's a learned behavior because we aren't fixing the underlying problem. We're putting the responsibility on the people who are the focus of the problem. I don't want to say victims because I don't like that word, but they're the focus of the problem. And I think we need to turn that responsibility back to the people who actually should be handling the problem, which is the people running the groups, the people running the pages, the people running the sites. They're the ones who should be handling the problem, and they're not. They're ignoring it. They're placing the blame on the people who are being harmed by the problem. They're placing the responsibility for policing the problem on the people who are being harmed by the problem. That's not right. So again, it comes back to, we have to advocate for ourselves, and we have to advocate for other people who are being harmed by this problem. And if we don't, nobody will. So we have to do it. And if, and it's insidious really, because you kind of laugh something off because you don't really want to be bothered with it, or you laugh something off because it seems pretty small. But the problem is that every big thing started out as a small thing, and people just let it pass or ignored it or didn't want to deal with it. And so it gradually became bigger and bigger. A person who starts out harassing doesn't probably start out doxing someone right away. They start out making a snide comment and getting away with it. And then they get a little thrill out of that, and they start feeling powerful. And then they do something they escalate a little more and get away with it and start feeling more powerful. And it keeps going and going. And we have the power to stop that. It doesn't feel like we do sometimes, but we do. But we have to use that power. And that's the problem, is that a lot of times we're reluctant to use the power because we don't want to be either accused of being the problem, which happens a lot. I can remember when I reported my sexual abuse, I sat in a room with a couple of officials from the school board, and they basically tried to make me sound like a person from a porno that had, the hot teen hitting up the older man or something. And I was like, dude, I never dated. I never, there is no reputation for that. There's no facts that fit that scenario. This isn't something that you can make stick, but they were damn sure going to try, because that put the onus on me. It didn't put the onus on them that they were letting this guy basically riot through their school for years and years and assault a number of young women and get away with it. And their response was, well, it was you. And I was like, no, it wasn't me. It was not me. I was as far away as you can get from being the teenage temptress. But it's easier to do that because then the responsibility isn't on them. Then they don't have to fix anything. Then they don't have to acknowledge that things are broken. That's the problem. So use the tools that are available. Report things if they bother you, if they make you uncomfortable, if you think they're, egregious in some way. And request that the rules get enforced, and make a fuss if you have to. And I'll admit, I don't like making a fuss. I'm the queen of trying to be polite and nice, and it gets me in trouble because people will, I hate to say it, but people will take advantage of that, and they will try to kind of route you into things in hopes that you'll just go along with it because you don't want to make waves. I mean, hello, Impressions Expo. That's entirely what that was. They were hoping that if they put my name up there and sent me a contract, I was just going to go, well, they announced it and I don't want to disappoint anybody, so I'm going to go ahead and speak. I didn't do that. And yeah, it's a little bit uncomfortable that I didn't do that. There was part of me that really was considering it. But it made me mad enough that I thought, no, this is not right. I didn't agree to this. This is not acceptable. And in a larger and more dangerous sense, that's what a lot of women encounter. I didn't agree to these things that are being done to me or being said about me. This is not acceptable behavior. So we have to stand up for it. That's the message that I really want to get out there today. If we want to change social media, if we want to change the stats, if we want to change the concerns that we have to take the responsibility for standing up for ourselves and standing up for each other and for making the social media platforms and the showrunners and the page runners and the group runners be responsible. And I will say this just because if you want a few groups to belong to that I think are well run, the Women in Garment Decoration Facebook group, that's my group. A lot of really amazing women, and we have a lot of good discussions, and we talk about a lot of issues over a wide variety of subjects. And I highly recommend it if you'd like to come and join us. And also for Applique Getaway, on my way to Applique Getaway, that's another great group. I run that one too. Good people where you can learn a lot and also learn more about Applique Getaway. Also, if you're looking for information about how to connect online safely or how to use various platforms safely, there's a great website called connectsafely.org. And I would highly recommend checking that out because I think it has a lot of information that could be valuable. The main thing I will tell you is really what I've been saying this whole talk that I've been giving here. It's kind of our responsibility. I hate to say that. I wish I didn't have to say that. But if we want things to change, we're going to have to push for it. It's not totally our responsibility, but if we want to see change, we have to agitate for change. And that's basically the message that I want you to get today. And I'm a little short of an hour, but I'm kind of at the end of what I wanted to say. And it is hot and muggy here, and it is hot in the studio, as you can probably see, because I'm getting a little shiny. So I am going to say thank you, everybody. I will be back next week. Not entirely sure what's happening yet. Guests have been a little interesting lately. So I may have a guest. I may not. It may be just me. But I will be back here. And Cindy says, I'm glad you reminded me. Applique Getaway group page is open all the time. Yes. The Applique Getaway group page exists forever. So if you want to come join, we'd love to have you. There's a lot of good conversations going on over there. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here today. I hope I put something out there that was helpful for you. And I'm going to turn this comment off. And I'm going to turn this banner off. And I will see you. Good rest of the week.